Hi, everybody. Eve Harrow on Rejuvenation on the Land of Israel Network. So what did you guys really think? You thought that there was going to be this incredible discovery of 8 more courses of the walls, the supporting wall for the Second Temple, and a Roman theater, and that I wasn't going to go and do like an in-depth interview on this. Not happening. So fortunately, I've met up with Tehilla Leiberman. I was in and I got to see these things a few days ago with a couple that I was with, and I was very lucky that Tehilla Leiberman, one of the archaeologists who's in on the discovery, was there, and she very kindly agreed to an interview. Of course, I had to get permission from the Israel Antiquities Authority, but they've heard from me before. And I'm sitting with her now on a beautiful day in Yerushalayim. And so first of all, Tehilla, thank you so much for taking time from, we'll talk about what it is you were doing when I came for the interview.
Oh, you're welcome. Nice to meet you.
So we're sitting here in Ir David in the city of David. But first, let's talk about the discovery. Okay, because that's been all over the news, and you were on the news. Some of you might have seen her on YouTube. She was there and very excitedly talking about the discovery. So first, let's start from the end. So what is this excitement?
Okay, so basically, as you said, we exposed 8 courses of the Western Wall that have been covered for the past 1,700 years. For the first time, they see light, which is moving, and it means a lot. It symbolizes a lot for us. But that's something we knew we were going to find, and we expected to expose it. What surprised us was the theater-like structure that we exposed right next to the Western Wall, which we had no idea we were going to find. And finding something you didn't expect is always exciting, especially when it's something that archaeologists and researchers have been searching for the past 150 years in Jerusalem.
Right. So there are sources that talk about a theater in Jerusalem. If you go to the Israel Museum and there's the model of the Second Temple period, there's this beautiful big theater, which, by the way, everybody, is a half a circle. An amphitheater is a whole circle. Amphi means 2. Okay, so the theater is a half circle. Even Hebrew University Mount Scopus makes this mistake. They have their theater overlooking the desert, and it says amphitheater on top, and Caesarea as well. So frustrating, but my listeners will never make that mistake. But it's not where you found it. It's up like more towards what we would now say is the upper city.
Right. So for the past about 150 years, there have been different opinions where to place the theater of Jerusalem, because every Roman city has a theater. And we know from historical sources, both during the Second Temple period and also after the destruction during the late Roman period, that there was a theater in Jerusalem. So different archaeologists or historians that reconstructed the city of the Second Temple in the Roman period placed it in different places. I don't think anybody thought it would be underneath Wilson's Arch, which is one of the reasons why we were extremely surprised to find it there.
So, but is it possible that this is not the theater? Because I know, from what I read and from what you told me the other day, from what I saw, it's a small theater. It's definitely not like on the lines of in Caesarea, what we have in Caesarea, or some of the other Roman theaters that we're familiar with.
It's definitely not a theater. That's why we called it a theater-like structure. It was probably used either as a bulletarian, which what we call is for like the communal meetings or for the city council to sit, or as an odium, which is more like for acoustical performances, for lectures, or for musical performances. It could also have been like used for meetings in the morning and then for performances in the evening. But it's definitely not a theater. There weren't plays put on there. Which only means that now that we found this theater-like structure, it doesn't come instead of a theater. It comes in addition to a theater. It means that we still have what to excavate till we find the real one.
But you're pretty certain that this was built after the temple was destroyed, because its location is right near the continuation of what we know as the Western Wall, like the big part of the Western Wall, which is not part of the temple. It's part of the surrounding wall of the platform of the temple.
Well, that's not the reason why we date it to after the destruction. The way we date archaeological sites is usually based on the coins, the pottery, and the carbon dating we have from different parts of the excavation. And what we see in our excavation underneath Wilson's Arch is that this building could be dated only to after the destruction of year 70. We see, for example, architectural elements that came from the Herodian Temple Mount. That after the destruction they collapsed and they were in the debris, and they were reused as building stones in the theater.
Okay, that's what I wanted to ask you, because all over Israel, but especially all over Jerusalem, that's the sound of children playing here in the city of David. And I hope it's not bothering you, because not only is it not bothering me, it makes me really happy because for so many, many, many years, the sound of Hebrew and the sound of Jewish children's voices were not heard in this part of the world. So it just gives me a special little thrill. Okay, so much for Jewish Mommy little segment over there. So in this theater, you actually have parts of maybe the temple itself that perhaps were reused in the theater?
Maybe the temple itself or other buildings that were built upon Temple Mount. But definitely Herodian building, from a big monumental building from that time period.
Well, even what we call Herodian building is not necessarily Herod himself, right? It means that style and that...
First century, right. First century C.
And he's dead by -4, so anything...
As I said, coins and the pottery, they all give us the date to the beginning of the 2nd century.
But something that you showed me when I was there is not finished. There, it looks like maybe it wasn't put to use. The theories are maybe that it was interrupted by the Bar Kokhba revolt, the revolt against Hadrian, 132 to 135. Is that still a possibility?
Well, as I said, we know that we could date the building to the beginning of the 2nd century. And now, if we go back to historical sources and other archaeological sites that we know from that time period, we know that was when the Bar Kokhba revolt erupted. And it's a complete speculation. We don't know, but being that Jerusalem was rebuilt by the Roman legion and all the construction workers were soldiers, they were busy working on this theater, and then the revolt broke out, and they all had to go fight the Jewish rebels, and they never came back to finish the building.
Now, you said that it hasn't seen the light of day for 1,700 years. Normally, we always hear 2,000 years, 2,000 years, 2,000 years. That's just kind of the round figure that we're given since the destruction and since we've been in exile. That figure happens to be wrong for a lot of reasons. But you're specifically saying 1,700 years. So when do you think this was all covered up?
Well, the theater itself was probably covered up towards the end of the 3rd century. But the rest of Wilson's Arch was all filled up in the second half of the 4th century. We know of an earthquake that happened during year 363. And there's a lot of damage in Jerusalem from that earthquake. And we see that the stones in the pier of the arch started moving. It's probably during that earthquake, and we assume that the people saw that the arch was losing its stability, and in order to support it, they filled up the arch with soil and with earth, so that it doesn't collapse. Well, right, and the theater was also covered because we dug through about 15 feet of fill, of earthen fills, and we found hundreds of coins, tens of thousands of pottery sherds, all dating up to the second half of the 4th century.
What kind of bones did you find of food? Because one of the interesting things, like, let's say, from the secondary cardo that I know Shlomit Wexler-Bedolach found was a very big pit full of pig bones, which is a total clue that this was Roman and not Jewish, because Jews don't eat pig. So did you find any food remains there? Anything that would give you a clue as to who was having lunch there?
Well, we did find animal bones. We found pig bones too. But we have to remember that whenever you excavate like any site, you would find things from that time period, but you also find finds that were there like from before, the residual finds. So we found lots of stuff from Second Temple period, although the theater was constructed later.
Okay, so my listeners, who are a very bright bunch, I have to tell you, might have noticed that you speak English really, really well. So tell us a little bit about you, how you, beautiful young woman, mother to young children, how did you end up like what you're doing today? A little bit about your background.
Well, I made Aliyah as a child with my parents. I came when I was, I think I was about 8. From the States, yeah, from New York. And so basically I grew up here in Israel. And then when I went to university, I chose to go study archaeology. Not like it really wasn't my dream since childhood, but they had a field trip once a week. So I thought, like, how bad could that be? And here I am having a good time. Yeah, working my hobby.
So how hard is it to become an archaeologist here in Israel?
Well, you have to go through a BA, and I have a master's in archaeology too. It's not so common. Like, it's not that everybody has an archaeologist in their family. But if people are interested, it's definitely doable.
And there's a job market. Like it seems, wow, there's all these tells. There's so much to dig here. We must have a, if you'll excuse the expression, a bottomless pit for archaeologists. But the truth is that there's not funding to go dig everywhere. There are really very specific sites that are deemed that important that we have to do that. So is it difficult? Was this your dream job to come here? Did you want to do archaeology somewhere else? Was it always Jerusalem? How hard was it to find a job in the field?
Well, I work for the Israel Antiquities Authority, and there I'm assigned to different excavations. It's not that I get to choose. Okay. And I work in the Jerusalem district, so I ran other excavations before I worked in Wilson's Arch, and I am going to probably run other excavations after Wilson's Arch. But Jerusalem, although it's one of the most intensely excavated cities in the world, there's still so much to uncover. So I think for at least for the future I still have some work in the next few years. Yeah. No, not yet.
So can you tell us if there was the most exciting find for you? Was there a moment where something just comes up and you're like, you can't breathe almost? Is there been anything like that?
Well, now that now in the excavation and underneath Wilson's Arch, it's not that all of a sudden at once we understood what we were looking at and we stopped breathing. But it's more like a jigsaw puzzle that you start we find little pieces, little bits and pieces, and at first we don't understand what we're looking at, and we don't understand how it makes sense and how they connect to each other and how they relate, the different elements we find. And then slowly we're able to put the pieces together and to form a picture that all of a sudden makes sense, and that was very exciting.
Sounds like just a totally, tour guides cheat because we tell people the things that you guys did and had to work hard at and figure out. We come at the end of the jigsaw puzzle when you publish the reports and you say, this is what it all means, but we're not so much involved in the process. And it just seems like a pretty exciting thing to do. But I think on the day-to-day, it's almost sometimes a little mundane, right? It's just a lot of moving dirt around and things until you have those aha moments.
Well, you always find, we're always finding things every day, all the time.
Amazing.
Yeah. And also, all those, even those mundane days, they're what help that's what helps us complete the picture and to tell the story, because you need all those small little finds, all the pottery sherds and all the little stuff. And only if you're able to put all those hints together, it could give you the indication of the real historical story of what was happening here.
So there's nothing that's insignificant.
No, everything is significant.
Right. So you look like the way that you're dressed, and you look like a religious young woman, at least how we define ourselves here in Israel, wearing a scarf and a skirt. Are there many religious young women in the Israel Antiquities Authority?
I don't know how everyone defines themselves. I don't want to go into that.
And I hate those definitions also. And my listeners know that very well, religious and irreligious. Just like the image. Okay.
Okay. But the chance of you going into any excavation in the country and seeing a female archaeologist with a skirt and a head covering is very, very low.
So why is that?
The truth is, I don't know.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. Right. I think maybe they think it's not so practical to raise children and be pregnant and work outside in sun and rain. I don't know. I really don't know. So
has that been hard for you? How many children do you have?
I have 3 children.
Okay, so you've been pregnant and working out in the sun.
And I manage. I get it's not easy in any job, I guess. So
right.
Okay.
Right. Do your kids know what you do?
They do. They think I play in a big sandbox.
But your hours are pretty crazy. You told me when I asked if we could meet up today, you said, yeah, I'll be there at 7. And you don't live right here.
No, so we start early, which is an advantage for me. This way I could get back on time to pick up my kids.
Right. So you don't sleep a lot.
I just go to sleep early.
How is it as somebody who is, someone who has faith, digging in Yerushalayim? Do you feel that you're uncovering our own past? Is it you find a lot of things from a lot of different civilizations? Is it sometimes painful, some of the things that you find?
Well, it's hard to understand how history could be painful, because those are the facts. That's what happened. This is our story. And even if it has some bright sides and some less, it's still, this is our story, because if we believe that Jerusalem is our capital, and it always has been, then it basically means that all the different cultures and the different nations that conquered Jerusalem, it's all part of the story of Jerusalem that basically tells our story of a nation. And I feel very privileged that I could take part in exposing the history and the past of Jerusalem.
Have you ever found like human bones?
We do find human bones, but usually we work with the Ministry of Religion, and they send their people to take care of it.
Right. And they're treated with the utmost respect and reburied. I know that.
Yeah, and they're reburied someplace else. There's some sort of grave someplace. I don't even know where that they rebury the bones. Because otherwise, usually it means that otherwise either a street would have been paved upon them or a building. So they take them out and rebury them someplace else.
So what I meant by painful was like if you come upon the signs of a destruction, a layer of ash or, weapons of war or something, and you know that maybe standing where you're standing, some of our forefathers who were fighting to defend Jerusalem and fighting for the freedom of the Jewish people on our land paid a very high price. How do you see yourself fitting into that story?
I think as an archaeologist that's working for the Israeli Antiquities Authority, to stand in a place that there was a destruction of Jerusalem and the ancient state of Israel. I think it means a lot because although there was a destruction, here we are. We came back and we reestablished that state, and I think it's the proof of our connection to Jerusalem. So I wouldn't define it as hurting.
Right. So there's some people around the world who want to close this dig down, or they don't like that they were going on here, and they say that we're trying to Judaize Jerusalem by the things that we're finding. Obviously, you feel differently, and the time periods that you're digging are not just obviously Jewish time periods, as you said. There's so many civilizations that came through here. Do you have historians and archaeologists from outside of Israel that also come in and ask you questions or work with you here a little bit, or is it only Israel Antiquities Authority archaeologists?
Okay, well, first of all, our main find, the theater-like structure, isn't Jewish. It's from the late Roman period, the Roman Legion, after the destruction of Jerusalem, of the Jewish Jerusalem. We do cooperate with universities and researchers from all over the world, and we also had volunteers come from different countries and from different religions that had a dream to come excavate in Jerusalem. So we had people from all over come work with us, and we're also open to hear more suggestions if anybody wants to cooperate with us in future research.
So I've heard from other archaeologists that there used to be a lot more places in the Middle East to dig, and now because of all kinds of wars going on in Syria and in Iraq, you can't really go into these places anymore. So Israel's getting to be a more attractive place because just about anything that ever happened is here. So are you seeing that or not so much?
Yeah. So we had a visit from people from a group of professors from Germany that usually work in the summer in Turkey, but they couldn't work there this year, so they came to visit Israel instead. So we do feel some of that.
So can you tell us something that hasn't yet been published, something that was found, maybe something little, like something exciting, a certain kind of coin, or I don't know what? Because I know all the time that it's like by the time you buy your cell phone, the next generation's already out there, right? They're already working on that. So I know that by the time that things are talked about in the press, you guys are ready. Like that's kind of old news for you. You knew about that a few months ago, and there's already something else that you know about, but can't really say anything. A little bit of a teaser to tell us something that you're working on.
Okay, so now our excavation is still ongoing, and we're still working. And the way archaeology works is the lower you go, usually the earlier finds. So now we spoke about the Second Temple period. We spoke about the late Roman period. But now, just the past few weeks, we started exposing something that predates both those periods. We don't know so much more, but we did find a very massive wall, maybe the city wall of Jerusalem, that of the pre-expansion of the Temple Mount by Herod. Maybe Hashmoneh, maybe First Temple, we don't know yet. I hope as the excavation goes on, we'll be able to give more answers.
Right. There's a real dearth of Hashmonai, considering that they were the kings here and the priests for 100 years. Herod kind of wrecked everything that they built and put his own things on top. So any kind of Hashmonai finds are tremendously exciting.
Right.
Okay. All right, Tehilla, thank you so much for taking the time out. What were you doing when I came in? I know you pulled yourself away. You were sifting through some Second Temple pottery?
Sorting pottery, yeah.
Okay. Are you, can you tell just by looking at a piece of pottery from what time period it is?
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's what we do.
Okay. So, when you break a dish at home, you don't feel as bad because you're dealing with broken pottery all day anyhow?
Yeah, basically.
Must have some Greek blood in you somewhere. Okay, thank you so much. I'll let you get back to work. And thank you really for putting like a personal look on this. And if anybody's listening, gets excited about archaeology, I don't think it gets any better than Jerusalem. And now,
definitely not.
You should see the look on her face. Like, absolutely not. This is the total best. Okay, terrific. Thank you so much. So I hope you enjoyed that interview. If you are listening to this on the first day that this came out, it's October 29th, 2017. I am off. I'm going to be guiding the Women's Mission for Israel Bonds all this week. Very, very busy, but hopefully I'll get a chance to interview somebody for next week's show. And then I'll be winging my way to the States. You can see my schedule on my website, www.eveharrow.com. And I hope I get to see some of you when I'm there. I want to thank Ben and Tabitha and everybody else at the network for giving me this opportunity. And I hope that I will be able to share many new discoveries in Jerusalem and in the land of Israel with you all for a long time to come. It's just an incredibly exciting time to be here. And I'm just thrilled that I can do this. So take care, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. Goodbye for now.